Hi everybody. Today what we're going to talk about is how to use the Develop module in Lightroom, including the HSL and color sliders and the custom white balance tab to color correct this image. Okay, so I recently received this image, and you can see from a former student who was wondering how it could be corrected properly. And so when you look at this image, there's this really heavy, gnarly magenta color cast, and it's not pleasing at all. And so what we're going to do today is talk about how we can correct this image to where it looks like this when it's finished. Now, if you look at the before, there's that really horrible magenta color cast, and then after we're done, look at how we've corrected the image. It looks much more accurate now, okay? So without much more, let's go ahead and get started. So here's our original image. And what I'm going to do before I even go to the HSL and color sliders, what I want to do is try to neutralize this color cast as much as I possibly can before doing anything else. And so what I'm going to do first is, one, make sure that we're in the Develop module first, and then we're going to come down to the Basic module, and I'm going to use this eyedropper tool right here. So if you click on it, you'll see that it's released from its anchor. And what we want to do now is come over and we want to move this around. And what we're doing is we're looking for a neutral tone. And what we're technically telling Lightroom is that if we come across an area like, for example, the white of this shirt, we're saying, hey, we want you to reference this patch of pixels and read it as if it was neutral gray. Okay? And so now if you watch as I move the eyedropper around, keep an eye over here in the navigator window, because you'll see a preview of how the image is corrected based on the pixels that are showing up in that 5x5 grid. Now, just a note, that 5x5 grid where it says pick a target neutral, that is a magnified view of the tip of that eyedropper. Okay, and so you can move around, and like here's a white shirt right here, and you see up in the preview or the navigator window that it gets pretty close. If we move it up here, it gets a little closer. But if we move it down here to the gray of this woman's outfit, you see that it produces, I think it's getting even closer. So if we use the gray of the carpet, that feels a little cooler. And the gray of her outfit is a little warmer. So it's really up to you where you want to start. I'm going to go ahead and start with using this area here right along her arm. And so when I click on that, you're going to see that it came pretty close. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, because from here on out, really I want to correct this image. I've used the eyedropper tool to neutralize that color cast, but I'm not done yet. What I really want to do now is really fine tune the color cast and the temperature of this image to make sure that the skin tones are represented properly. The other thing I'm going to look at as well is, see this blue field area right here? This is the light from the flash that's reflecting off the wall, and that blue is kind of annoying. And so we're a little bit later on in the tutorial, I'm going to show you how to correct that blue and make it neutral so it appears to be white. Okay, so now that we're done with this, we're going to scroll down to the HSL and color sliders. Okay, you're going to see the HSL is short for hue, saturation, and luminance. Okay. Okay, so hue, when you see the word hue, you see a bunch of different sliders here. What hue is representing is the tonal range of a color. So you'll see red here. When hue is selected, it's showing us the tonal range of red. Okay. Saturation is the strength of the color. So you can see that we can go from no red at all to absolute, really abundant red. And then luminance is actually the brightness of the color. Okay, and so we're actually going to go through each of these, and we're going to use each of these to actually correct this image. Okay, again, what we're doing right now is we are focusing on the skin tones specifically. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is I want to start with saturation, because what we're looking at here is that there's still a really rich orange here on the skin tone, and I want to neutralize that just a little bit. Now, because we're working with skin tones here, it's really important to understand that we're really, because of the skin tones, we're really only going to be using red, orange, and yellow. And because there was that magenta cast originally, we're also going to work with purple and magenta, but otherwise, whenever working with skin tones, you're really only going to work with red, orange, and yellow at this point, okay? And so let's go ahead and go through that. So I'm just going to go ahead and make some basic adjustments to red, orange, and yellow first. And you're going to see that there are these it's going to start making slight adjustments. Now be careful of the orange, because if we go too much, they start looking funky and dead. And what we want to do is just desaturate this just a little bit. We want to tone down the orange just a little bit. And then the yellow, we want to do the same. Now don't worry about this here, because later on when we're close to finishing, I'll show you how we can then globally bring everything back up and make it just a little bit more punchier. Okay, now finally for the blue on the wall, I'm going to come down to blue. And I'm going to really neutralize that. And you see immediately that blue goes away and it changes completely. Now the purple, I'm going to use, adjust it slightly, and magenta, I'm going to adjust it slightly as well. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have so far. Okay, big difference here, right? Okay, let's keep going. So we have that. Now you'll see that there looks like there's some yellow or some green there on her forehead right here, and it looks like there's some back there too, and we can actually go in and play around with that a bit and see if we can fix it. And you know, we don't want to do too much. I fixed it a little bit. Okay. Now let's go ahead and go to luminance. And we want to be careful with this. We don't want to do too much, but I'm gonna brighten the colors just a little bit. And you're gonna see that it starts to actually, just by brightening the colors, our skin tones are really starting to come through. I'm gonna bring up purple a little bit because that was there, and I'll bring up the magenta. I'll brighten the magentas a bit. Okay, so again, there we go. Now finally the hue. Now the hue, let's go ahead and see what we can do with this. You see that now this is really where we can start adjusting. We can isolate one specific color, and we can actually we can change the reds to oranges and oranges to yellows, which we want to keep those oranges pretty stable there. And we can make the yellows to greens. And what we're doing is by doing this, we're balancing the colors out. And so you can already see that now. Let's take a look at the before and after again. Man, we're really close at this point. Okay. Now, finally, there's one last one, and it's called color. Okay, now what color does is it allows us to actually go in and isolate each of these colors specifically. So I can go right to red, and you can see that there's adjustments have already been made, but if I want to go in and only tweak the reds, I can go in and do that now. I can make specific changes only to that one particular color. And I think this is pretty cool. It's doing the exact same thing, but you're just looking at it from a different perspective. a different module or a different tab. That's all. Okay. All right. So now the other option we have here is that um, if you come down here to the next tab, it's called split toning. And this is where we can actually do some pretty interesting things. So you'll see that there's highlights and shadows. And you'll see that in the highlights, if you have a color cast in the highlights and you want to correct for it, well, we can get in there and try to fix it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click right here in the greens. And now what I'm going to do is increase that saturation. And I'm now technically adding, anywhere there's a highlight, I'm adding a little bit of green to it. And I can actually move through the sliders and I can choose just the right color to help neutralize any color casts. Okay, so there we go. That's the highlights. Shadows the same thing. And then let's adjust that. Oops, no, I don't want to adjust that, sorry. Keep that right where it's at. And I want to adjust the saturation. There we go. Okay. Now, finally, we've come pretty close to where we want it. If you want to come back in and adjust your white balance, you can do that. Warm it up or cool it down. It's up to you. Tint. This is where we're adding more green or offsetting it with magenta. But since it was magenta, adding a little bit more green will really help neutralize those colors there. Now, finally, here's the last part of it. Now, I feel like I am pretty close to being finished, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is come through and I'm going to fine-tune this with vibrance and saturation, okay? This is where I can really then add the final touches to this correction. And what I want to do is just brighten up the midtones a little bit. And then saturation, we want to be very, very careful of, because saturation will blow out the colors. Like, look at that, ew. And look at that, black and white, right? But I want to have it just slightly unsaturated, just a tiny bit, just to tone those oranges down, just so it doesn't get too out of hand, okay? And so finally, there it is. I feel like I'm pretty close to it. And again, we can adjust the vibrance a little bit more. And then if you really want to, you can go back in to the HSL sliders, and this is where you could really go back and make some final adjustments. Again, if you can adjust the oranges, if you want to bring some color back into the orange, you can. But again, with skin tones, we want to be really, really careful. The yellows, you want to be careful of too. Okay, and so I think we're just about there. I think that's pretty close for what we wanted. Okay. All right, there we go. Let's click fit, and let's see the before and after. And, well, there you go. That's how I did it. That is how I started with this really saturated magenta image, and I ended with a color corrected image. I hope you like the tutorial. If I missed something or if you have any other questions, let me know and I'll try to address it. Okay? Thanks a lot. Bye.